We got a Facebook question here from Neil. He asked, were Old Testament believers indwelt by the Holy Spirit in the same way that the New Testament believers were? If not, what is the difference between then and now?
I love this question. I really worked through this as hard as I could for a book I did on rediscovering the Holy Spirit. And there's a whole chapter on it. It's really important that we understand both the continuities and what's really new about the new covenant. So in the prophets, can't go through them all here, but especially you think about Jeremiah and Amos and Joel. You have these prophecies, Ezekiel, you have these prophecies of what will happen in the last days that will be so different from anything we've seen before. And included in that is the end of the sacrificial system and the forgiveness of all sins once and for all in one sacrifice. But right alongside of it is the gift of the Holy Spirit. And it's represented as an outpouring that will be not only greater in its extensiveness, it will include men and women, and not only will males be circumcised, but men and women will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. And but it's also going to be greater in its intensity, in its depth. The Holy Spirit is going to indwell his people in a way that he hasn't ever before. And you see that with Jesus in John 7 when he talks about the water that will well up in us by the work of the Holy Spirit. Living water will surge from us out to others. And in verse 39 of chapter 7, Jesus says, now, and then John 7:39, we read, now this Jesus said about the Holy Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for as yet the Spirit had not been given because Jesus was not yet glorified. So the Holy Spirit will be sent to unite us to the second person of the Trinity, who the Holy Spirit united to our humanity in the incarnation. But uniting the eternal Son to our humanity didn't yet save us because his humanity was perfect. Throughout his life of obedience, it was holy and sanctified, but his humanity wasn't yet glorified. And before we can be saved, we have to be united to the Christ who is finished in his work, who is the complete, glorified humanity that will secure our resurrection and glorification one day. So that couldn't happen until Jesus himself, the head, was glorified. When the head is glorified, then the members can be united to him for their glorification.
You know, Mike, I know that there are a lot of Christians who wrestle with how do I know that I'm actually filled with the Holy Spirit? And there are even teachings out there that suggest that not all Christians have the same amount of the Holy Spirit. How do we respond to that?
Yeah, no, all Christians now, after Pentecost, have the same Holy Spirit. You don't get pieces of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is either there or he isn't there. And the Holy Spirit came upon prophets and priests and kings in the Old Testament, but he didn't indwell them. The promise is that he will indwell us. In Jesus' teaching in the Upper Room Discourse, John 14 through 16, Jesus teaches there very clearly, in fact, he says explicitly, you know him. The world cannot receive him because they don't believe in me. The world cannot receive the Holy Spirit. But he says, you know him, for he is with you and will be in you.
Yeah.
So there's the difference. Now the Holy Spirit is with the disciples, but after Pentecost, he will be in the disciples. Every member of Christ, every believer is going to be a living stone indwelled by the Holy Spirit, just as the Holy Spirit used to indwell the temple. That is the most exciting thing next to our forgiveness of sins that I can imagine. All believers share in this. In Ephesians 4, Paul makes it very clear that we all share in one Lord, one faith, one baptism by one Spirit into Christ. One. But then he goes on to talk about the different gifts that we've been given in different measures. So in addition to being filled with the Spirit, in addition to being indwelt by the Spirit, we all have differing gifts given to us by the Holy Spirit. We ought not to confuse those two things, as if some believers really have the Holy Spirit and other believers kind of have the Holy Spirit. All believers have the Holy Spirit. If he didn't indwell us, then we wouldn't have the down payment on our final resurrection, which all believers have in Christ.